rewind a bit, and I promise you we are going to get to Oklahoma. I know Texas is sort of the dominant storyline in this pair. Obviously, Oklahoma, in terms of football programs, is better right now. But there's a thing that I want to bring up with Texas, a dynamic with the football program, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, especially if Texas is in the SEC right away for the 2022 football season. Let's go back to the 2013 season when Mac Brown had overseen a football program that had gone from consensus top 10, if not top 5, to one that was more like top 15. And so he goes 8-5 in 2013, and then they make a change. They go to Charlie Strong, who has 3 losing seasons there, and then they get Tom Herman, which everybody felt at the time was that home run hire. He goes 7-6, then 10-4, then 8-5, and 7-3, and was dismissed after that last season. Now they circle back with Steve Sarkisian, a hire that a lot of people like. Texas spent a fortune for him. Whether he makes it or not, I don't know. But here's the point I'm getting at, okay? Texas has been in a down cycle for a while now. And that becomes much tougher to climb out of that and get to where Texas wants to be, especially if you come into the league in 2022 where you've got an Alabama program that right now is in an era where it's probably the greatest program in the history of college football. A coach in Nick Saban who has just signed a new deal and will be coaching into the foreseeable future. You've got several other teams that have made the playoffs. You've got Georgia is a national factor every year. You've got Florida has popped back up and become relevant again. And I can go on and on and on. Texas A&M, a team that's on the cusp of the college football playoff. And basically almost every program in the league is respectable. And even the ones who aren't, you look at Kentucky, traditionally has not been one of the better programs in the league, but now that team is competitive and going to New Year's Day bowls. And even as bad as Vanderbilt is right now, that's a program that's had a pair of top 25 finishes within the last 10 years. My point is, and sorry for going a long way to make it, I almost wonder for Texas football if the timeline to join, if next year maybe is not ideal given where that program is in its process of trying to get back where it wants to be, where you come in and you're playing a meat grinder of a schedule. And if you, God help you, if you draw the wrong teams from the other division in a year, and I guess we presume Texas will be in the West. I don't know if Alabama goes there or not, but the point is, just about whoever you play, the schedule is going to be brutal. And for Texas, where it is, starting over with another coach at a time where it's been just pretty mediocre for about a decade now, that is something that I think is going to be interesting to see. Does that help or does that hurt Texas's process in getting back to where it wants to be within the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's a really good point because I think, in the Big 12, there's a lot more of a manageable path, I think, to get there. Because again, yes, you know kind of who the big dogs are in the Big 12, but there's a lot more of those teams that maybe fluctuate a bit more. And then, of course, you've got some struggling programs near the bottom of that. Meanwhile, if you jump into the SEC, let's take this year, for example, even though we know that they're not stepping in this season, but let's say that it did start this season, right? And because this is, I think, going to show you just pretty much the trend that you would see even if we look ahead to next season. Alabama, like Oklahoma too, right? Like Oklahoma's a top 2, top 3 team this season, so you assume that's going to continue. So you look at Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, A&M's a top 10 team this season. That's 5 right there. And then you just keep going down the line, right? Like you look at, LSU and teams like that are on the way up. I think Ole Miss will be one that's on the way up too. I'm sure there's somebody I've just forgot to name, but that just kind of, I think, like that is a very strong top group. And I think as of right now, right, this season, we would probably put all of those teams ahead of Texas, perhaps, just in a preseason poll. Now, all we have to go on is what we see on paper. That could change once we get to the season, but and some of those programs may take a little bit of a step back next season, may not be as strong. But yeah, like you said, if you're a Texas team that's really starting to say, all right, we have to completely revamp the way we do things in football, and that we are back to, we want to win a national championship every single season. I don't think that goal's ever changed. They just have been much closer than others in certain years. it's a tough challenge, right? And that's what I think, that's why to me in the current SEC landscape, that's what makes Alabama even more special that they've been able to do it given this current, landscape in the SEC to have that sort of dominant reign that they have, even as strong as it's been. Now you add a Texas, you add an Oklahoma, those are potential, pitfalls along the way. Now, if Texas gets back to where they think they should be and they could be, Oklahoma, as we said, they've been pretty much there for a while now, for the most part. So it's a challenge. And I think, like you said, that's where scheduling is going to come into it. Do we go with the pod system? Do we go with some sort of flex scheduling? Like, how do you do this to where it's going to work out? Because it doesn't matter. I think in any scenario, you're still going to have a very challenging slate. And for Texas and Oklahoma, you're going to have a more challenging slate in the SEC conference wise than you had in the Big 12. And I don't think there's really a debate about that.